Hey guys, what's up? This is Vinnie Stevens here, and welcome to another video for my channel. Welcome to another album ranker video. So as you can see, I'm in a different location this time. Still the same house. I'm just in my bedroom. I'm rather me sitting at my desk. I've decided just to do something a bit different, as this is going to be the permanent kind of place that I'm going to be doing these videos, because I've kind of got this bit of space here to record these videos. So yeah, this is going to be the permanent area for hopefully the next year. So in this video I am going to be ranking Megadeth albums. Couple of things before I start. I am not doing any of those. I'm doing all 16 studio albums, if I've got that right, from Killing Is My Business up to Dysphoria. I am not doing any like live albums like Rude Awakening or any compilation albums. So enough of me talking, let's get on with the video. So last position is Risk. So this is the 8th studio album by the band. It was recorded in January to April of 1999 and was released on the 31st of August of that year. This was the last album released by Capitol Records and the first since 1990 to feature a lineup change with new drummer Jamie Discraro, and the last to feature longtime guitarist Marty Friedman, who left the band later in 1999. Meant to be a breakthrough on alternative rock radio, this album is best left forgotten as it was a near career suicide. It left fans alienated and critics unimpressed. The lead single Crushed Them did okay on radio, thanks to clever promotional wrestling, but album sales took a dive and it ended up the label dropping the band. So my review on this, I think this album should have never been made. It was an album that nearly killed the band off, and it was career suicide. No wonder they were dropped from their label. That's how bad this album is. I don't know why a thrash metal band would make alternative rock album for alternative rock radio. The single Crushed Them, it isn't that great of a song, but it has appeared up in greatest hits albums over the years. But anyway, on to the next one. So next album is The World Needs a Hero. So this album is a nice studio album released by a band that was recorded in 2000 and released on May 15th, 2001 under the new label Sanctuary Records. The first of two albums, this album represented a heavier musical direction, and this was the last two albums to feature drummer Jamie Discraro, and the only one to feature Al Bertelli on the guitar. This was the last album to feature original bassist David Elson, our bassist, till 2010. And this was the first album since 1990 to feature the mascot Rick Rattlehead on the cover, which is somewhere on the screen here. For a few songs like Motorcycle and Dread and the Forsaken Mind, this was the last album before Dave Mustaine disbanded the band after he went into relapse into addiction and had a serious arm injury, which led to his recovery and accepting Christ. My review on this album to me, it isn't that great, to be honest. I thought this album would be the band's kind of comeback, but wasn't. But it did. I kind of see that this band was returning to a more heavier musical direction. Some songs like Motorcycle and Dread and the Forsaken Mind, they kind of a bit meh songs, but they did kind of breathe a bit of life back into the band. But kind of after this, I'm glad the band disbanded. Obviously not for the reasons that happened to Dave Mustaine. Pretty much just kind of giving the band a bit of a break, a bit of a breather. So on to the next album. So the next album is Cryptic Writing. So this is the 7th studio album by the band. It was recorded in September 1996 and released on June 17th, 1997. This was the last studio album to feature Nick Menza, rest in peace. His departure marked the end of the band's longest line up to date. The album features 12 tracks with accessible sound structures, simply aimed for radio airplay in order to make the music more inclusive for a wider audience. These changes were met with mixed opinions from music critics who noted the band were moving away from their thrash metal roots. This album has strong singles like Trust and Almost Honest, plus the lyrically dark fear like Use the Man and A Secret Place. The band's self-assurance wasn't quite matched by songwriting inspiration here, with just as many songs proven forgettable in the long run. So my review on this, this album again isn't really that great album. I kind of see this album as the start of the decline in the band. It's got a handful of set of tracks on this album. I do see this album starting to move away from thrash metal towards a more radio-friendly sound. This album, it is forgotten in the long run. It did have some solid songs like Trust, Almost Honest, and The Man and A Secret Place, but I don't think the songwriting is quite matched to previous albums, and the inspiration wasn't really there. So on to the next album. So the next album is Super Collider. So this is the 14th studio album by the band. It was recorded on December 18th, 2012 to March 13th, 2013 and released on June the 4th of that year. This was the first album released by Tradecraft, a Universal label created by frontman Dave Mustaine. The album featured guest appearances from Disturbed's frontman David Drummond. It marks the first time the band has released more than one album with the same lineup since Cryptic Writing, and it's the final album to feature drummer Sean Drover and the guitarist, who I have forgotten his name, who departed in 2014. This album is closer to commercial ambitions since Risk. Once again, fans and critics were largely unmoved by the fresh average offerings of songs like Burn and Dancing in the Rain, and even nearly fresher like songs like Kingmaker and Built for War. In other words, the band need another reset, which gave Mustaine motivation to come back with a vengeance. My review on this album is kind of a meh album. I don't know what to think of it. I do see this album as about average. Like, this album was actually closer to commercial ambition since Risk, and it is an album songs were just largely unmoved on this album. Songs like Burn, Dance in the Rain, and even the songs like Kingmaker and Built for War are just kind of they're good songs but not great. I think this album did lack a bit of motivation. I think the good thing is about this album, they had Disturbed lead singer as a guest on one of the songs, which was a bit of a change. I kind of don't see this as a bad album. I just kind of see this album as average. Obviously, at that time the band needed another kind of reset. So on to the next album. So the next album is Endgame. So this is the 12th album by the band. It was recorded from January 7th to May 19th, 2009, and this was the first album to feature guitarist Chris Broderick. following Glenn Drover's departure in 2008, and the band's last studio album with bassist James Lemezzo. There are 11 tracks on this album with lyrics inspired by subjects ranging from Lord of the Rings and the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 to insanity, torture and crime. This album is overlooked through no fault its high clad material, which extended the curve with Bond intended by the system has failed and confirmed by United Ambitions, but somewhat is over. This album is overshadowed by both of them. It's got great songs like the album Cut and Engage Experience songs, which Cryptic classical strains and Sealed with a Kiss. My review on this album, this is a good album. It is one of those albums that has been overshadowed with like the likes of The System Has Failed and Untitled Ambitions. I love the theme that behind this album, the lyrics, and it has a good decent amount of songs such as the classical string Sealed with a Kiss, the instrumental Divik Kaza as the opener, and songs like The Day We Fight, Head Crusher and The Right to Go Insane. So on to the next album. So the next album is The System Has Failed. So this is the 10th studio album by the band. It was released on September 14th, 2004, and it was the band's final album to be released by Sanctuary Records. It was the first album to be released when the band reformed. The album features session players including former Megadeth guitarist Chris Poland. However, he didn't rejoin the band and only provided lead guitar parts and solos. And this was the only album to have Mustaine as the only certified member. This was quite a bit of work to be done and a lot of material smacked the old gories, but Starbuck was precisely what the band needed to restart its career and convince fans to give them another chance. This album, it is a good album, to be honest. I don't really consider it, this is kind of their comeback album, more of a build-up album on what's to come. You can hear Mustaine as a reformed person. You can hear the verse Psalms 23 and the song Shadow of Deed. I would wish like this album had a proper lineup, not just session players and Mustaine. It does feel like a Mustaine solo album. Some good songs on it, like Die Dead Enough of Mice and Men and The Scorpion, and my favourite from this album, Back in the Day. There was a lot of work and a lot of material smacked in vocals, but it's a the step back the band had from is what they needed to kind of restart their career and get their fan base back. So on to the next album. So the next album is 13. So this is obviously the 13th studio album by the band. It was recorded on May to June 2011 and released internationally on November 1st, 2011. It was released in Japan a bit earlier on October 27th. It is the first album since 2001, The World Needs a Hero, to feature bassist Dave Ellison, who returned to the band in 2010. Albums follows the success of the last album. In addition to new material was written for the band, and the band decided to rework and release several older songs, some of which have been previously seen as demos or bonus tracks. The album has 13 tracks, obviously, and every song has made a positive first impression. Songs such as Public Enemy Number 1, Fastland and the title Cut. There was most of their songs such as The Peachy, We Are the People and the accidentally hilarious record, plus the standout song Black Swan, which was recorded outtake from Untitled Ambition sessions. My review on this, I think this is a good album. It's a good comeback for bassist Dave Ellison. Like, it has got some new material as well as like previously released material that were demos and bonus tracks, as well as re-recorded songs from on the Untitled Ambition sessions. And 13 tracks is a good amount for an album, I think. Songs like Public Enemy number 1, it is a positive first impression to the album. Other songs like Fastland and the title cut, good songs, and as well as We Are the People. It is a bit of a peachy song, and Wrecker, which is a hilarious song. Also, I have to include the standout song, Black Swan. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is the Spook Beer. So this is the 15th and current studio album to be released by the band. It was recorded from April to July of 2015 and was released on January 22nd, 2016. Prior to this album, longtime drummer Sean Drover, guitarist Chris Broderick announced their departure from the band. They were replaced by Lamech drummer Chris Adair and Angular guitarist Kiro Lario, if I have said his name right, which made an imminent chemistry and positive result. Following the lukewarm response to the band's 2013 album, this album responded largely favourable reactions from considering the band to form for the band, return for the band. So this album, the band is in good musical health, and it was a proof of a minute change over the course of its tightly assembled 10-song track list. So I think this album is a big improvement from their last album, the 2013 Super Collider. I think with this album it is a return of the band after a bit of a short break to reset. There are a lot of things that brings this album together compared to the last one. It shows the band are in good musical health, and there is proof on this album. There has been change. The first couple of songs, Fred Real, the title track, and Fatal Illusion, pretty good songs, as well as the instrumental Conquer or Die and the Fear cover, Foreign Policy, which it's a bit different to have a cover song on a Megadeth album, or on a more Megadeth album. So on to the next one. So the next album is Untitled Ambitions. So this was the 11th studio album by the band. It was recorded from April 19th, 2006 to January 18th, 2007 and released in May of that year. It was released through Roadrunner Records and was recorded with an all new lineup except for Dave Mustaine. While touring to promote the album, Glenn Drover left the band for personal reasons and was replaced by Chris Broderick. Leaving this is the only album which he contributed to. The band reconnected with their classical 80s ethics like never before, or indeed ever since on this album. The album has a classical hallmark, omnivorous riffs and courses, controversial politics, fresh, all of them display on modern-day classics like Sleepwalker, Washington Is Next, and Gears of War, and the remake of A True Brilliant with Christina Kazaba, which just put the cherry on top for this album. My review on it, this is a great album. I think this album is the highlight of the album, of the band's modern day side. So this is their kind of comeback. It's got that band's classic 80s antics like never before, or indeed ever since. It's got the furious riffs and choruses like thrash metal song. The songs are such good songs. I think I would say their modern day classics are off this album, such as Sleepwalker, Washington's Next, and Gears of War, and the incredible remake of To Remount with the Kana chorus, Christine Kanskaba, and this album obviously keeps Megadeth as still one of the big four in thrash metal. So on to the next one. So killing is my business. So this was the debut album by the band. It was released through Combat Records. It was recorded from December 1984 to January 1985 and released on June 12th of that year. The band were given £8,000 to record the album, but the band fired their producer and produced the album themselves and spent most of the album's money on drugs, alcohol and food. The album ended up being poorly produced, focused on themes of death, occultism, if I've said that right, and violence. The song on this album features are Mentrix, the controversial cover of 1965 song These Boots Are Made for Walking, and the instrumental Love to Death Skull Beneath the Skin. So my review, this is a good album for a debut. I wouldn't say it's the best debut album, like it was a cheap album to make, and the production is poor since they don't have a proper producer. I love the theme on this album, focuses on death, autism, violence. It does have that classic Megadeth sound, but Dave Mustane's voice isn't exactly developed on this album compared to later albums. It's got good songs on it, such as Mentrix, which does sound like the Four Horsemen by Metallica, only with different lyrics. The cover These Boots Are Made for Walking. It is a bit of a controversial cover to do, and the instrumental for the first part of Love to Death as an opener for this album, as well as the follow-up to it, Skull Beneath the Skin. In other words, it's a good album. So on to the next one. So the next album is So Far So Good, So What? So this is the third studio album by the band. It was recorded in 1987 and was released on January 19th, 1988 by Capitol Records. It's the only album to be recorded with drummer Clutch Buckler and guitarist Jeff Young, both of who were fired from the band in early 1989 after the album's world tour. This album focuses more on fast tempos with technical ability and lyrically. The album addresses a variety of topics including nuclear holocaust and freedom of speech. The album was recorded under chaotic times but holds up together. Songs like the full-arched filler like Mary Jane 502 and the totally unsurprising cover of the Sex Pistols' Anarchy in the UK. Other gems, killers like Set the World on Fire and Hook in Mouth, and Incomparable in My Darkest Hour. So my review, this is a good album. Again, this is one of those albums that have grown on me. I love the fast tempo with the technical ability and lyrically. I love the variety of topics that they include in this album, such as nuclear holocaust and freedom of speech. Besides the album, even though it was recorded during a time of chaos, it came out great. Songs like the cover of the Sex Pistols' Anarchy in the UK, bit different for a thrash metal band. Other songs like Mary Jane 502, good songs, as well as other gem killers on this album like Set the World on Fire and Hook in the Mouth and In My Darkest Hour. Very good songs. Consider them as like classics. So on to the next one. So the next album is Euthanasia. So this is the sixth studio album by the band. It was recorded in 1994 and released on November 1st of that year. This album was not a large stylistic departure from the band's earlier recordings. However, it does mark the continuing elevation of the band's follow-up from their last album. And the album titles is a play on words, implying that society is emphasizing its youth. The second half of this album is a little light on top. Mustane's songwriting, notwithstanding the thought of provoking maturity of family tree and other irresponsible. I thought I knew it all. But a first half of this album does include Reckoning Days, Train of Consequences, which is both their songs are perfecto. Other songs like the ballad A Tour de Lamont, who is particularly vulnerable and sublime closing harmony guitars. So my review on it, pretty much from the description, I would say in the review, a lot of it, but this is a great album. It is probably one of their last greatest albums of their kind of classic lineup and their heyday until the system has failed. This album was a bit different to previous album. It is a large stylistic departure, but it does continue the evolving of the band's like previous albums. Like I love with every Megadeth album there is like a theme to it, including with this album. The first half of this album is good. It's got a good solid set of songs like Racking Down Train of Consequences. The second half it is a little light, but Mustaine's writing is still strong, and the ballad I told the month is such a good song. So on to the next album. So the next album is Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? This is the second studio album by the band, released through Capitol Records. The project was handed over from Comeback Records, resulting in the original mix of the album being produced by Randy Burns. The label then brought the rights to this album and hired another producer named Paul Lang to mix it himself. The recording of this album was difficult for the band because of the ongoing drug issues the members had at the time. Drummer Garo Samuelson and guitarist Chris Poland were fired shortly after the album's tour for drug abuse. It got stunning songs like Wake Up the Dead, The Conjuring, Devil's Island, and the title track boosted the Immortal boosted lyrics, if I've said that right. The instrumental prowess on side 2 has songs like Black Friday and My Last Words. So my review, this is a great studio album for a second album. This album has grown on me as well. I consider this as their breakthrough album and established the band as one of the big four in thrash metal, others being Metallica and Slayer. It is a step up from their debut. Mustaine established his signature voice, the band got their signature sound right, it's got a better production value to it, it's got some Megadeth classics on this album like Wake Up the Dead, The Conjuring, Devil's Island and the title track. And even on side B it's got good songs like Black Friday and My Last Words. So anyway, on to the next one. So the next album is Countdown to Extinction. So this is the 5th studio album by the band. It was recorded on January 6th to April 28th, 1992 and was released on July 14th of that year. It was the second studio album to feature the classic lineup of Dave Mustaine, Marty Friedman, Dave Ellison and Nick Menza, who contributed to the songwriting process on this album. The band enjoyed mainstream success. There's no runs with this album, even if you look hard. And the band enjoyed mainstream success. At the height of their careers, the album received positive reaction from critics and fans. It's got the politically oriented lyrics and simplified song comparisons to their previous records. It's got great songs like the title track, Four Clues of a Dream, Sweating Bullets, and as well as Skin on My Teeth. My review on this, I think this is a brilliant album. This is another Megadeth album that has grown on me. It's got that classic lineup. All the band members contributed to songwriting, which resulted in such a great album, I should say. I see this album as the height of their career. It's got a great set of songs on it, such as the title track, For Clues of a Dream, Swan Bullets, and Skin of My Teeth. Great classics. Songs for the band and even in thrash metal. I love the oriented lyrics and simplified sound, and I can't really see anything wrong with this album. at all. It's hard to find any faults with it, and I consider this album as probably one of the best thrash albums of all time, and a classic it's never get old and hasn't aged today. So on to the next and final one. So the next album is, and the number one is Rust in Peace. So this is the first studio album by the band. It was recorded from 1989 to 1990 and was released on the 24th of September of that year. This album has been mentioned as one of the best thrash metal records of all time. It was the first album to feature a classic lineup with lead guitarist Marty Friedman and drummer Nick Menza. Again, there is no wrongs with this album. It is a piece of art, of musical work. It's got great songs like Holy Wars, The Punishment's Due, Heinrich Ting, as well as Five Fingers, Lyricia, and Tornado Souls. And you see some of these songs as band classics. My review on it: this is a brilliant album. I think this is one of the best Megadeth albums, if not one of the best thrash metal albums ever made. The classic lineup just works perfectly. The songwriting is up there, so is the music. There are no wrongs with this album, not what I can find. It is a piece of musical work. It's got great songs on it. A lot of them actually got me into Megadeth were off this album and stuff. The songs like on this album, like Holy Wars, with The Punishment's Due, which is the signature song. Holy Wars actually is about the Northern Irish conflict where I'm from. Heinrich Team, Five Fingers, Lucia, and Tornado Force are just unreal songs, and even kind of the theme to them as well. And I just love the cover work of it, which is somewhere on the screen here. All in all, it's a great album, and I'm going to wrap this video up. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and hit the instant notifications bell in the description below. So hope you enjoyed this video and the new view I've got. This is where I'm going to pretty much do my videos now as well. More album rankers are coming. I have the scripts written for them, ready to go. I just have to find time to record. I do these kind of album rankers. They are my own opinion. I have listened to all these albums as well. So yeah. So the next video is going to be Bon Jovi. So keep an eye out for that video to appear up on the channel, and I guess see ya.